protecting our liberty.
Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your host for this evening's show. See, I almost stumbled over co-host because I'm missing my buddy Andrew Couture, but don't fear, he's going to be joining me on the panel tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about 2017 and a year in review. I think we as panelists can all say that this has been a pretty eventful year. So before we get into what's going on, let me introduce you to our esteemed panel. And I will start with introducing formally, not as my co-host, but attorney Andrew Couture, attorney at law who lives in Fitchburg but has his law practice in Boston. We have attorney Chris Walton. Chris lives in Princeton but has his practice in Fitchburg. And former Mayor Dan Mylott, who, of course, everyone knows lives in Fitchburg and is a member of the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us tonight and your willingness to join us in talking about the year 2017 in review. This is our December show, so we can say Merry Christmas, and we will. So let's get started. We're going to start out in our year in review with the national scene. And certainly Donald Trump, President Donald Trump's election victory last year and inauguration in January plays the biggest role of what's happened in America during this year. So let's get started with talking about Donald Trump in his first year in office. I'm going to throw this out, so please just jump in because this is where it starts. There was a lot of trepidation early on during the election and then leading up to the inauguration itself. There were so many people who said he can't be taken seriously on the world stage. He's not a diplomat. He's not a politician. You know, many people looked at him, and probably realistically or rightly so, they looked at him as a TV host and not as a statesman. How do you think he's fared? Who wants to jump in first?
I mean, just look at the economy. I mean, the economy is growing leaps and bounds. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates since, what, Reagan maybe? In addition to that, you know, he just returned from a trip overseas to, from Asia in Japan, and he got 10 basketball players that were currently in jail facing a 10-year sentence over in Asia, or China, for shoplifting, and they just let him go. I mean, he's doing the job, even though, some of the Democrats and unfortunately some of the Republicans don't like the job he's doing. Mm-hmm. You can't deny the results that this man is getting.
Chris or Dan, how do you think he's doing?
I was highly impressed with his state visit when he started out in the Middle East, the reception he received out there. I think he formed some real partnerships over in the Middle East. I think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, a strong partnership, not somebody leading from behind. And you saw the displays put on, the parades with the. You didn't see that with the last administration. And I think they're looking for a strong partnership with the United States.
I think the president has made a real effort to start the process of bringing our allies back together again. They had strayed. They hadn't been there, and it was the country's own fault. And this president has made it one of his top priorities is to bring the world together again. And I think he's done a great job. And I think the trip to Asia really highlights the other trips he took because he was so successful in making those contacts with other leaders in these other countries.
Now, one of the things he has oftentimes talked about, and I'm wondering your opinion, has he achieved this, is bringing back America's role as being the lead nation of the world. There's a lot of people who they don't understand why we want to be a leader in the world and on the world stage as a nation. I think President Barack Obama kind of was of that. He said, well, everybody loves their nation. Everybody is the leader of the nation in their own eyes. But do you think with all of his world trips, and the man has led a grueling schedule for his age. He's led an absolutely grueling schedule. Do you think he is bringing America back to its place of prestige on the world stage?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's peace through strength. You know, it worked under Reagan. We saw the fall of the Soviet Union under Reagan through the peace through strength, and he's bringing it back again. And you can't deny the results.
Yeah.
I think the opposition was really afraid he was going to come across as a bully when he came out there, and it's not. He's forming partnerships. He's expecting, you know, other world leaders to shoulder their burden and have everybody work together in a strong partnership. And if we're, you know, the largest nation, one of the most money, we're taking the lead, but we expect everybody to shoulder the burden and join the partnership.
I think the country, America, has misunderstood his whole feeling about America first, because it wasn't to exclude anybody. It was to show the unity of this country in leading the rest of the world, and being the one that's out front. And no one can say that this president isn't out front. I mean, he doesn't take a back seat to anybody.
Almost like where we were in World War II. I mean, if it wasn't for the United States, we would have lost World War II.
Right.
And we would have had Germany. Well, I mean, the whole geopolitical world would be different and would have looked different.
Right.
Now, one of the other things that Donald Trump continued to tell us on the campaign trail was that he was the big deal maker. Of course, we all, I don't know if you've read it, but The Art of the Deal. And, you know, he was the consummate deal maker. As he goes to the different countries, but also he seems to be making deals, trade deals. Do you think that these are successful, some of the trade deals he's been making?
I think he's going to be extremely successful in the deals that he's putting together. We have to remember that they don't all happen the day he makes the announcement. They take time, but I think we're going to find by the end of the year, actually the middle of next year, we're going to find out that this is a great deal maker, that he is very capable in discussing problems with other leaders and making decisions that last.
Then what's happening on this national level? He can't seem to make deals with Congress. He's going around the world. He's becoming very successful. He's the statesman, the consummate deal maker. We see it happening with the trade deals. And yet he comes back to the United States in his legislative agenda, and we're looking at things like the Obamacare repeal and replace. We're looking at the tax reform. What's happening?
Well, obviously, you know, his foreign policy is great. Unfortunately, domestically, he's just running into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. You know, the Democrats are throwing anything and everything that they can to try to stop the Make America Great Again agenda, and even some Republicans, you know, are really starting to throw opposition against him. When I forget exactly what year it was, but it was one of the last years of Barack Obama. They wanted to pass, you know, the repeal of Obamacare, and they did it. And what happened? It went to Obama's desk, and he vetoed it. Okay. Now we have the House, the Senate, and a man in the White House that we can get rid of this disaster that is the health care bill, but nobody has the gumption to, you know, to actually pull the trigger and make it happen and actually save healthcare in this country.
But why is it that now you hear, once you hear that he wants to repeal and replace, or that's on the table, repeal and replace, all of a sudden, all the people who've been complaining for years about Obamacare, it's costing them so much, their deductibles are sky high, all of a sudden now they don't want to lose Obamacare. Is that because they're being force-fed this mantra from the Democratic side and the media? Or do you think people are just so unsure of what's going on?
I think a lot of it has to do with being unsure, fear of the unknown. I think the replacements need to be more upfront. People want to know what to expect when it's replaced. And I think, you have a lot of elderly people, a lot of low-income people who are really dependent on health care, and were able to obtain it under the Obama plan. So I think we need to do a better act communicating what it's going to be replaced with.
And that they're not going to be out in the cold.
Cold, yeah.
With nothing.
Not a good feeling.
No, it isn't, yeah. No, these are real issues for people.
That's right. I think that the country doesn't understand how the system works. The president has an agenda, but that's as far as he can go without the consent of the Congress. And the Congress can't seem to get their act straight.
Is it more, so that I agree with you, so now is it more that the Republicans in Congress seem to be in disarray, or is it that the Democrats in Congress are just absolutely obstructionist and working against
I think
him?
that's what you're saying. It came out on, I went to the inauguration, started out, they called it resist. It's obstructionism. That's all they're doing. They're not working. They've drawn this line in the sand, and they're not willing to do anything. And I think the president's going to have to take the lead. And we have the majorities in both houses, granted a slim one in the Senate, but I think you can, especially what happened today in Congress with the passing of the tax reform bill. So hopefully the Senate gets its act together.
Gets its act together.
I think, Chris, that you have a good point. But my point is this. It's not just the Democrats that are obstructionists. We have Republicans who are obstructionists.
There's a few.
And we send these people to Washington to do their job. That's their job, is to do the legislation.
Don't get me going on term rent.
I think we all support term limits.
I think it's a lot.
They don't go there and sit down and do their work. They have a job to do. I mean, we have a couple of very prominent Republicans who have been as obstructionists as Democrats. Shame on them.
Yeah, I'm in
Shame
complete
on
agreement. I mean, you look at some of the things that Mitch McConnell has been doing, and just complete obstructionists. Because honestly, what I think is it's the drain the swamp movement.
Well, you think so? That gets into the drain the swamp. Are these? Is the obstruction coming from the Republican side because of the swamp?
Yeah.
They don't want to leave what they feel comfortable with.
Well, I think you're
That's
right.
a lot, yeah.
Now, because we only have a few more minutes to talk national, so I can't leave the national stage without talking about Mrs. Clinton. Mrs. Clinton has just written a new book called What's Happened, and she's going around and talking about what happened. What did happen? By all accounts, she should have won the election. Why didn't she?
She was a terrible candidate. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. I mean, what happened is, she insulted half of the country with the deplorables comment. The basket of deplorables that just cannot be redeemed. I mean, why would anybody who would be on the fence say, you know what, Trump is actually making sense, and then, but do I really want a reality show host representing the country? Maybe we want to go with, well, wait a second, she just said half the country is deplorable and can't be redeemed. I think that was a problem for her. In addition to that, her health. I mean, her health was definitely in question.
It was problematic.
Yeah, I mean,
and she was running against somebody who had such vigor.
Yeah.
That the comparison was.
I just want to say thank you, Donna Brazil. Maybe she put the last nail in the coffin.
Well,
I'm with you, Chris.
I think Donna Brazil has really opened the eyes of many people to say exactly what potentially was happening, or I think many of us realized that was happening, is that Mrs. Clinton was running the campaign. The campaign was being run up by the Clintons.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue was they were promised a large bill of goods when President Obama took office 9 years ago. And they didn't come through, and a lot of people in the center of the country, it was time for change. And she didn't represent the change they needed, and they liked President Trump's message, and they went for the change.
Which actually then, I know we have to move on to our others, but are the parties getting too old? Both political parties, but Democratic Party. Is the graying of the Democratic Party right now, when we look at who's on the stage, you hear the name Joe Biden coming back. Hillary Clinton might come back. I mean, is this a problem for the Democratic Party?
I don't know if you saw that recent SNL sketch. I hate to get that.
I mean, it's
pretty
almost
much
like
answers your question.
We're back. Okay, quick.
I think that, to put my 2 cents in,
Yes.
I think it's both parties are old.
A little too gray.
And the leadership in both the Democratic and the Republican Party is old.
Yeah.
There's no new progressive people there.
Yeah.
You know, let's face it.
And I think honestly that each of the party there's a fraction of each party that has gone to the extreme in both Democrats
Yeah.
and Republicans. You know, I mean, you have the extreme left, the Antifa left, that are
That would be the Liz Warren.
yeah, the Liz Warren, the Bernie Sanders to some extent. I mean, some of the shootings, one of those shootings in Washington, D.C., where a gunman went out onto a ball field
Well, that was
because he wanted to kill
Congressman Steve Scalise.
wanted to kill Republicans. You have this ultra left wing that unless you say exactly what they want you to say, you're an enemy of the state. And that's concerning to me. I mean, you have people in the streets calling for communism and socialism. It's that's frightening.
Well, just to go on with this before we end this, because I don't want to stop the conversation on the national level. What about the economy under President Trump?
Well,
Are you happy
I mean,
with it?
I think he has made great strides. No one expected that you see it happen so fast, and it certainly is a very positive thing he's done.
What do you think he's done? Because I don't really know what he's done. Is it just that he's sort of introduced hope? Is it that he's
I think he's introduced confidence.
confidence?
Yeah.
That's
Through,
what I
through
think.
the regulations, he's gotten rid of a lot of
I think a lot of the
regulations.
deregulations has been a huge impact, especially dealing with fuel costs, because coal's back in the picture now. A lot of other things like that.
I also think it's just a pro-business atmosphere as well. Don't be afraid to do business in the United States. He got rid of the regulations. He's trying to rein in the taxes against small businesses and trying to get it under control to where it would be profitable for a company to come back to the United States after they've been in Mexico or they've been in China for the past 10 years, even longer than that.
Well, wasn't that always one of our hallmarks of our country, of America and the freedom, was to start our own businesses and have the courage, and yet we also had the sort of the base in place for people who wanted to go out on their own.
Right, exactly.
And maybe we're bringing that back. So they're getting it on both ends. The corporations are coming back to the country because maybe they find a workforce that's skilled, but then also we've got the opening of confidence for people who want to go out on their own.
And nobody uses the bully pulpit better than this president right now.
That's for sure.
What about his tweeting?
That
Seems to is part of the bully pulpit. That's his bully pulpit.
I wish he'd put it away once in a while. But
I honestly think his tweeting is trying to get around the fake news or what he calls the lying media. And it's true. They are skewing what he's doing to the point where it doesn't make sense. They're saying, oh, he's doing a terrible job. He went overseas, he embarrassed himself. No, he didn't. If you take
That's
a look.
not the reality.
Yeah, if you take a look at what he's doing a fantastic job. Oh, the economy's going to crash. It keeps growing.
Well, it did today.
Yeah, but it's still on the positive.
Yeah.
And that's his one way to get the information out to the people who follow him, to say, don't believe what you're hearing, because that's not the case. I honestly think that's him talking to the people, almost like the fireside chats, from back in the
His
day.
fireside chats.
That's
Dan,
right.
were you going to?
That's his way of communicating with people. He's not going to change that. He knows it works. Why would he change?
Yeah.
I mean, we may not like it. I don't particularly like it all the time.
Yeah.
But so what? He's happy. The people he's tweeting with are happy. What's the problem?
Yeah. Let's just go to the state and now start looking at a couple of state issues. Of course, we've got Governor Charlie Baker. His popularity rate is extremely high for somebody who's been in now almost 4 years. I was just looking today, it's just under 70%. But his unfavorability rating, along with that, is extremely low. It's under 14%. So he's really in a very good position to face the electorate again next year in November of 2018. Do you think he has any real competition for the position? The names thrown out so far is Seti Warren, Jay Gonzalez, and Bob Massey. And if you're like me, you say, who?
Yeah.
I mean, is there any real competition for Governor Baker that
Not
you
right
can
now.
see?
I don't
Do you
see
think
it.
Maura Healey, who is one of what some people say is the only real competition, do you think she's going to turn around and challenge him?
I don't think she is.
I don't think it would be possible for her to be able to challenge him, just based upon where his numbers stand right now. And trust me, my friends and the people who appreciate the Second Amendment are no friends of Maura Healey. And I think there is a huge backlash against her, against what she has done, at least in the Second Amendment community. And we voice that loud and proud, and I don't think she'd be able to even pull half the votes away from him that she would need.
I was just reading these statistics, and I hate for our audience to think that I'm getting very statistically dry on them, but just as an example, this was, because next year when Governor Baker faces his electorate again, he's also going to have Elizabeth Warren on the ballot. Now, Elizabeth Warren, of course, we all know that sometimes people go to the polls strictly to vote for a certain candidate, and she got 5 years ago, 1.7 million votes against Scott Brown. Governor Charlie Baker got just a little bit over 1 million votes. So it's very possible that if people come out en masse to vote for Senator Warren, to vote in support of Senator Warren, that influx of people who vote strictly Democratic could weaken his position. Do you see that at all happening, or do you think people are pretty confident in his ability that even somebody on another ticket or another side wouldn't?
Speaking with a lot of my Democrat friends I know in Worcester, and they're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
A lot of them would split their ticket, I'm pretty
They
confident.
would, yeah.
They're just very confident with the job Governor Baker's doing.
Yes, yeah. But yet here again, Governor Baker still struggles with his own legislature, much like what we talked about, President Trump struggling, Governor Baker is struggling. He came out with a budget for state budget for $39.4 billion, and he trimmed $320 million from it, and then all of a sudden the legislators rise up, oh, you can't take this out of the budget, you can't take that out of the budget, and by and large most of the things they went fighting back for were sort of pork for their own regions. How do you see Governor Baker being able to change and get more support for some of his own agenda, which oftentimes for him is fiscal? How can he do it?
I think all of his priorities are fiscal, because I think he realizes that he is not going to be able to change any of the other issues. That's the only issue that he really can control, and he can only control that so far.
Right. Right.
I think it's a matter that we need to tell the legislators that we know that we want more support for the governor's programs, because it only makes sense. They're fiscal issues. They're not outside of that fiscal idea. It's all fiscal that he can deal with. And I think we need to tell our legislators, Republicans and Democrats, that we want more help, more cooperation in looking at these issues.
I'm probably going to throw this out to the wrong group, you all being Republican, but I also want to point out for our viewers the makeup of our state legislature. In the legislature, we have 160 seats, 126 are Democrats. We could call many of them the resistance on the state level. We only have 33 Republicans. The Senate, we have 40 state senators, 34 are Democrat, 6 are Republican. Does that play a part in Governor Baker not being able to get more done?
Of course.
Yeah, you can't
absolutely.
sustain a veto. But, you know, the Mass GOP is working pretty hard to change the dynamics there. Speaking from the state committee side, I can give you a few facts and figures. During the last presidential election, that cycle, that was the first time we didn't have a loss in the legislature. We actually had a net gain of 1 down on the Cape. Will Crocker was elected down there, so that was our +1. And since January of this year, 55 towns have been, new towns and wards have been organized, Republican town committees. So, and you see a lot of work being done in the ground game for the next, next year.
So that's really what we need to do is move. We need to change the complement of the legislature.
absolutely.
Finally, we're really running out of time, so I need to go quickly. Local issues. I don't want to stick strictly to Fitchburg because we know this is a regional show and we share it with so many different people, cities and towns. What are the biggest issues to a city and town? Fitchburg, you can go from Fitchburg, but my guess is that's going to mirror most cities and towns. Dan, I'll start with you because you're former mayor.
Well, I think the biggest issue that any community in the Commonwealth faces is financial issues. And there isn't a lot of sharing going on between the state and the local cities and towns. It may appear when they send the big checks out that we're getting our fair share, but we're not getting our fair share. It is nowhere near where it should be with all of the issues that the city faces, given the rules and regulations that are set by the state. The environmental issues alone are
That goes
way
to,
more.
and that almost speaks to the regulations again that President Trump is working with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
What about real estate? I always think of real estate where in the local level, it seems, like, especially out here in north central Massachusetts, where so many people are moving now, we've become in some ways a bedroom community for the 128 and the 495 Boston Belt. Are we pricing our own people out of homes?
I don't think so. I think you're seeing a market correction. I mean, we had a lot of foreclosures for a while, which depressed the values, and a real huge impact on the city budget, I'm sure, and tax revenue. So I think what you're saying is basically, a correction after what happened in 2008, 2009. I mean, there was a lot of properties on the list here for foreclosure in Fitchburg.
There were
I think you're right about
hundreds.
that, Chris.
Yeah.
Guess what? We're over. Our half hour is up. I want to thank you all for coming. Former Mayor Dan Mylott, thank you so much. You're always a source of reason and knowledge. Attorney Chris Walton, thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight. This is great having you.
Pleasure.
And of course, Andrew, we've got another show to do in a couple of weeks, so you'll be sitting here with me again.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you for coming, and we thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in here with the FRCC. As we leave, we want you to remember that your local city and town Republican committee is your only grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and your conservative values. We encourage you to join us. Why? Because to us, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people, and because we always stand for freedom. Thank you, good night, and happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values, and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.